My heart now beat fast, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep my mouth from falling open and my nostrils from spreading to the ends of my face. My old fear of slipping between the boards of the jetty and falling to the dark green water where the dark green eels lived came over me. When my father's stomach started to go bad, the doctor had recommended a walk every evening right after he ate dinner. Sometimes he would take me with him. When he took me with him, we usually went to the jetty, and there he would sit and talk to the night watchman about cricket or some other thing that didn't interest me, because it was not personal. They didn't talk about their wives or their children or their parents or about any of their likes and dislikes. They talk about things in such a strange way. And I didn't see what they found funny, but sometimes they made each other laugh so much that their guffaws would bound out to the sea, and on duty was the one he enjoyed speaking to. It was like being locked up in a book filled with numbers and diagrams and what ifs. For the thing about not being able to understand and enjoy what they were saying, I had nothing to take my mind off my fear of slipping in between the words of the jetty. Now, too, I had nothing to take my mind off what was happening to me. My mother and my father, I was leaving them forever. My home and an island, I was leaving it forever. What to make of everything? I felt a familiar hollow space inside. I felt I was being held down against my will. I felt I was burning up from head to toe. I felt that someone was tearing me up into little pieces, and soon I would be able to see all the little pieces as they floated out into nothing in the deep blue sea. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I could see that it would be better not to think too clearly about anything. The launch was being made ready to take me, along with some other passengers, out to the ship that was anchored in the sea. My father paid our fares, and we joined a line of people waiting to board. My mother checked my bag to make sure that I had my passport, the money she had gave me, and a sheet of paper placed between some pages in my Bible, on which were written the names I had not known existed with whom I would live in England. Across from the jetty as there was a wharf, and some stevedores wave of strong feeling came over me, and my heart swelled with a great gladness as the words, "I shall never see this again," spilled out inside me. But then, just as quickly, my heart shriveled up, and the words, "I shall never see this again," stabbed at me. I don't know what stopped me from falling in a heap at my parents' feet. When we were all on board, the launch headed out to sea, away from the jetty. The water became the customary blue. The launch left a wide path, and that looked like a road. I passed by sound smells that so from that had gone, stopped paying any attention to them. But now here they were, and the ever-present "I shall never see this again" bobbed up and down inside me. There was the sound of the seagull diving down to the water and coming up with something silverish in its mouth. There was the smell of the sea and the sight of small pieces of rubbish floating around it. There was boats filled with fishermen coming in early. There was the sound of their voices as they shouted greetings to each other. There was the hot sun, there was the blue sea, there was the blue sky not very far away. There was the white sand of the shore, run-down houses all crowded next to each other. For in some places only poor people lived near the shore. I was seated in the launch between my parents, and when I realized that I was gripping their hands tightly, I glanced quickly to see if they were looking at me with scorn, for I felt sure they must have known my never see this again feelings. But instead, my father kissed me on the forehead and my mother kissed me on the mouth, and they both gave over their hands to me so that I could grip them as much as I wanted. I went to the verge of feeling that it had been all a mistake, but I remembered that I wasn't a child anymore, and that now when I made up my mind about something, I had to see it through. And at that moment to the ship, and that was that. The goodbyes had to be quick, and Captain said my mother introduced herself to him and then introduced me. She told him to keep an eye on me, for I had never gone this far away from home on my own. She gave him a letter to pass on to the captain of the next ship I would board to the Barbados. They walked me to my cabin, a small space that I would share with someone else, a woman I didn't know. I had never before slept in a room with someone I didn't know. My father kissed me goodbye and told me to be good and to ride home often. After he said this, he looked at me, then looked at the floor, swung his left foot, and then looked at me again. I could see that he wanted to say something else, something that he had never said to me before, but then he just turned and walked away. My mother said, "Well," and then she threw her arms around me. Big tears streamed down her face, and it must have been that, for I could not bear to see my mother cry, which started me crying too. She then tightened her arms around me and held me to her close, so that I felt that I couldn't breathe. With that, my tears dried up, and I was suddenly on my guard. What does she want now? I said to myself, still holding me close to her. She said in a voice that raked across my skin, "It doesn't matter what you do or where you go. I'll always be your mother, and this will always be your home." I dragged myself away from her and backed off a little. And then I shook myself as if to wake myself out of a stupor. We looked at each other for a long time with smiles on our faces, but I know the opposite of that was in my heart, as if responding to some invisible cue. We both said at the very same moment, well. Then my mother turned around and walked out to the cabin door. I stood there for I don't know how long, and then I remembered that it was customary to stand on deck and wave to your relatives who were returning to shore. From the deck, I could not see my father, but I could see my mother facing the ship, her eyes searching to pick me out. I removed from my bag a red cotton handkerchief that she had earlier given me for this purpose, and I waved it wildly in the air, recognizing me immediately. She waved back just as wildly, and we continued to do this until she became just a dot in the matchbox-sized lunch swallowed up in the big blue sea. I went back to my cabin and lay down on my berth. Everything trembled as if it had a spring at its very center. I would hear the small waves lapping around the ship. They made an unexpected sound, as if a vessel filled up with liquid had been placed on its side now was slowly emptying out.